Here we go. All right, so let's talk about dimensions today. Kind of a departure from all of the geometry creation that we have been working on so far, right? But a good topic nonetheless, okay? One thing before we actually get going on annotation, as you work through a set of architectural drawings, there are several kind of very well-defined phases of architectural drawings, right? We have programming, where you sit down with the owner and you determine requirements for their project. You have schematic design, where you work through all of those requirements and come up with a basic design. You have design development, where you refine that design into actual architecture, for the client. And then you have construction documentation, where you have the design of their project pretty well finalized. And construction documentation is sort of, it's progressing the drawings to a stage where they can be built, right? So we add construction annotation, we add dimensions. The drawings are very fine-tuned. We're making sure that things are the right sizes and, all that good stuff. And then we have, CA, construction administration, where the project's actually being built, okay? So, in terms of kind of designing our projects, right, you're maybe at like a DD phase, design development phase, okay, in the process. And once you add your addition to the project and you do, those kinds of things and get it finalized, for your midterm project, you'll move into CDs, construction documentation, right, where you add descriptive annotation and you add details and different things like that to progress the drawing set to a construction level, okay? So we're going to pretend that my little house here has, been designed the way it should be, right? And we're going to talk about annotation today. Before we do that, I just want to bring up one topic. I've had a couple of questions on kind of this same topic, so I want to talk about it. And it has to do with phasing, right? You all seem to be working with phasing pretty well. You seem to kind of have a general understanding, but there's maybe some nuances to it that maybe need to be explained a little bit, right? So let's talk about phasing just a tiny bit. I'm going to move this section over. There we go, okay. So in your midterm projects so far, right, you've been asked to take out a wall, and it's not this wall, right, but you've been asked to take out a wall, to put it on a demo phase essentially, right, and to then add more space to the project, all right? So I'm going to add some more space to this project. The way that I'm going to work through that, well, number one, sorry, let me just do something. I'm going to hurry and put all of these on an existing phase.
So when I tried doing that on mine, it was just grayed out when I selected everything. It wouldn't let me change it.
So if you select anything other than geometry, like if you select a CAD link file or a dimension, or it won't allow you to change everything to it.
So like any furniture or whatever that I dropped in?
Furniture should be okay, but if you grabbed an elevation marker on accident or any type of annotation, anything like that, then it won't allow you to do it.
Okay, yeah, 'cause I had to go through and select everything.
It's a pain in the neck. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I was able to select everything but for example, if I had something like, let me see if I can add a dimension in here. I'll show you guys. Well, I've got.
So you're saying the CAD file when we went off, if that was in there?
Yeah.
Got that?
Yes. Yep, so that's a good example. I don't really have a lot in here, but if I selected this and the CAD file got selected, it wouldn't allow me to change the phase because that's not something that can be phased. Yeah. Okay, so I have everything in on an existing phase right now, okay? And if I look down here at my phase, my phasing, it tells me right now that I'm in the new construction phase, okay? That's different than all of these things are existing, right? New construction in the phase area right here means that when I draw something new, it's going to be a new construction item, okay? If I change this to existing, that means, so you saw everything get kind of bright, so it's my current phase. That means that anything that I draw will be on an existing phase. So if I go to wall, architectural, and then I choose, to do some walls on the interior here, we'll just box these windows right in, right? Anything that I draw now is on the existing phase, okay? So this very bottom feature right there, in fact, let me close a few of these things up here. Okay, that tells me that if I start drawing new things, that what phase they're going to go on, okay? If I change this again to new construction, I see all of the existing stuff grayed out, and if I go to draw a wall, then what I draw is, it looks new, okay? So that's what happens when I change that area. The phase filter allows me to visually filter things on the screen according to phase. So it doesn't change things. It doesn't, this doesn't define what phase the objects you're drawing, where they occur, okay? It just allows me to see different views of things. So right now it's saying show all. That means it will show me existing, it will show me new, it will show me demo, okay? So if I choose show me previous plus new, okay? So I'm seeing the previous phase, which is existing, and I'm seeing the new phase, okay? Right now, I have all of my, let me change that to show all again. Right now, I have kind of everything showing. I haven't kind of demoed anything, right? So let me talk about how I'm going to demo things, right? We have an existing phase, we have a new phase, and then, you know, obviously you guys are going to have to demo things out of your models to add your additions, right? So the way that we sort of demo things, we're not going to add them to a demo, I keep saying, I want to say layer, right? We're not going to add them to a demo phase. We're going to define them to turn off at a certain point, right? So this wall right here, it has been drawn and created on the existing layer. Sorry, I shouldn't, the existing phase. And here it says, when is it going to be demolished? And you say none, so that means it's going to stay forever. If I change this to in the new construction phase, okay, then that means that at the point where I change from, you know, existing phase, existing, it's all there, to new construction, I get a dash demo, right? So I didn't take this and put it on a quote demo layer. I just said, hey, when I go into the new construction phase, that wall is going to be demoed, right? Makes sense, okay? And it shows dash. Now you're thinking, well, why is, you know, showing dash? I know that means demo, but how do I make it so I don't see it, right? I don't want to see that as I'm drawing new enclosure on this little project, right? That has to do with phase filtering. So I'm showing all right now. If I choose the previous phase, which is the existing phase, plus only new features, then that goes away, right? It's still there. It's just been turned off visually on my screen. It's like in AutoCAD when you turn things on and off, okay? So if you want to compare this to AutoCAD, it's like the layer manager where you can set up different phase filters, whatever, so you can see different things at different times, okay? So if I grab this wall, it is an existing feature, and I want it to go away. I want it to be demoed in the new construction phase, right? Things start going away because I'm defining them to be, you know, essentially demolished when we start our new construction, all right? Okay, so if I go into a 3D view, let me just say this. Every view, you have to set your phase filters. So just because you set it in your floor plan view, that doesn't mean that it translates to any other view, right? So in this 3D view, phase filter is set to show all, and we're in the new construction phase, right? And what is happening here is it's showing everything existing, and then it's showing these, you know, the walls are red, indicating they will be demolished in the new construction phase, right? So if I change this to existing, in the existing phase, I've, you know, got everything here. In the new construction phase, those things are going to go away. And if I filter my new construction view to show previous plus new, then those are gone, right? Or if I choose previous plus demo, there it is, okay? So if you're working with your phases, I would assume that most of you, the questions I've gotten, you know how to use them. It's just you're a little bit confused on how to view things correctly on your, you know, in your model, or in your views, I guess I should say. All right, so I've demoed those items, right? Now it's time for me to add new walls, okay? So I'm gonna make sure I'm in my new construction phase. I go up to wall, and we want architectural. We want an exterior wall. And because I'm in the new construction phase, anything, finish face exterior, anything that I draw, right, will be bright, align, AL, click, click. Did I get that? Yep, there we go. Okay. So if I change my phase filter down here to previous, or let's say show all, right? I see my demoed items. I see where the new items are coming in, right? I change this phase filter to show previous plus demo. The new stuff goes away and I just see the demoed stuff, right? And then if I do previous plus new, oops. Okay, there it is, right? Now, of course, my floor is on a previous, it's an existing element, so I don't have any new floor over here, so I would have to draw a new piece of floor on the new construction phase in order for that to work correctly. Okay, yep?
What can I do if my phasing, where it says phase created, doesn't really show demo plus new or previous? It doesn't show the ones I need.
Do you have a little?
No, it just shows existing and new construction.
Well, that's not a filter, that's your phases. Does that make sense? So you phase created, so hit escape. So if you move down now, you're escaped out. If you move down, you have a browser right there. Then see now you can change what you want to view the filter. So show all. Okay, does that help somewhat? Hopefully clarifies a few things about phasing, right? And you know, it seems kind of like a pain in the neck because you think, well, if I change the phasing in one view, you know, really that's how my project is going to be created, so why doesn't it apply to every view, right? And the reason is because, you know, on my level 1 floor plan, maybe I just want to show the new enclosure, right? But, you know, I can right click and hit duplicate view with detailing, and maybe in this view, I'm going to right click and rename this demo floor plan, right? So on level 1, new floor plan, I want to see the new architecture, right? And on demo floor plan, I want to change my phase filter to show previous plus demo, right? So I can achieve viewing different things on different floor plans using those phase filters. And that's really why you, I'm going to hide this. That's really why, you know, the views are all set up to be individual, right? Meaning you have to change how you view things on every single level, essentially. You know, if I were to come down here and I have some sheets created, right? There's my 3D view, which is kind of nice. Click, delete, and I pull over my demo floor plan, right? Click, and I pull over my level 1 floor plan, drag it over, click. They're obviously not very good scale-wise, right? But I have 2 different plans now where you can very clearly see, oh yeah, I get it. This wall is coming out all the way to here, right? And then this wall is going to extend out at the point that that wall comes out, okay? All right, let me go to my demo. I'm gonna change the scale of these just a tiny bit so that we can work with them a little bit better. I'm gonna change my crop region to be not so gigantic. I want these both to be on the same sheet so that we can look at them. There we go. Turn my crop region off. It's beautiful. Level 1. Crop region. See, even here it's like I've got this crop region that I have to
visible when you plot? Will it be visible?
So in your, if you look at your print settings, if you go to setup here, we have hide crop boundary in the options. So it shouldn't be, right? But if that is unchecked, it will be. Yep. All right, so I'm gonna go back to my sheet here, And, oop, I forgot to change the scale of that one to 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so I have these two floor plans now, right? I have a demo floor plan and I have a brand new floor plan that I can have live right next to each other. What is that one? That one is demo floor plan. And the crop regions were so gigantic that, you know, I got these gigantic view titles, which is terrible. Let's get that moved up. Click. Drag this little guy in. There we go. Okay. So again, the phase filters, right, per view, it's a pain in the neck because you have to set them every view, but again, it's kind of nice because we can see different things on different plans. Okay. All right. Any questions on phasing? Anything you're running into? All right, let's talk about dimensions. I'm going to go to...
So you phase out your windows, or when you phase out that wall or whatever, the demo,
right.
The windows go to demo?
They do, yeah. So Revit is trying to be smart, right? And it thinks, well, if you get rid of this whole wall, it's going to get rid of the window with it.
So we have to put in new windows then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And if you have like, sometimes if you want to get rid of it, like a window, but you want to leave the wall, if you demo the window, let me show you what happens with that. So if I put a window in here, and do you see how it shows that looking like that? It demos it. And in the new floor plan, oh, it put a new window in. Usually it will infill with wall. It'll show like, if you don't infill it with wall, it will show a little piece of brand new wall right there if we've demoed a window. That's interesting. Hold on, let me see if I can get that to work. Let's see. We're going to... Yep, okay, so it's demoing at the wall. Oh, it's because the window was on the new phase. So we'll make that existing, and we want it to demo in new construction, right? And it puts a new piece of wall in there. Yeah. Okay. All right. Looks good. Let's talk about dimensions. I'm going to show you how to generate dimensions, and then I'm going to talk about how to alter them a little bit, okay? And I guess, well, I'm going to hold off on that topic. We're just going to talk about how to generate them today. I also want to show you how to add text and how to add leaders into your drawings, okay? Text and dimensions are going to be added into your model per view, okay? Text and dimensions are view-specific items again. So dimensions that I generate in one floor plan don't show in another floor plan, right? Again, the idea is that, you know, maybe on a demo floor plan, you just want to show overall dimensions to show how much is being demoed, right? But on a new construction plan, you want to have more detailed dimensions to show where new walls are going, where new windows are going, where new partitions are going, all the, you know, that good stuff. So dimensions and text and annotation like that, it's all going to be view specific again. So, you know, it's bad in that when you generate these things that you have to do it, you know, per view. So we're dimensioning and adding annotation to every single view. But it's good in that you have visual control of these things, which makes it really nice. I'm going to go to my demo floor plan first, and we're going to add some dimensions. Under the Annotate tab, we have all of our dimensions right here, okay? And I'm just going to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go through these first 5 for now, okay? And if we have time, I'll go over a couple of other things. I want to kind of move quickly through dimensions and text because I'd also like to show you how to add rooms today, so that on your midterm projects that you have rooms added to your projects, okay? So we have a couple of different dimension types. I would say that by far the most common type of dimension I use is the aligned dimension. An aligned dimension will dimension an object and it will align it in any orientation that it is, meaning if you look at that little graphic, those dimensions follow the angle of the wall they're dimensioning, okay? As opposed to linear, which only create vertical and horizontal dimensions. So in that little image there you see, you know, kind of the same building, right? But with an aligned dimension, it follows the alignment of the structure. And in this illustration, right, it shows that you're only going to be able to draw straight dimensions with a linear dimension. Okay, so we have aligned and linear. Angular will create a dimension on an angle. Right, makes sense. Radial will allow you to measure a curve. So circles or arcs or different things like that. It will point out the center point of the circle, and if it's an arc, it will point out the center point of the circle that generates the arc. Okay, and then we have a diameter. So the diameter will measure the full diameter of a circle. Okay, the shortcut for dimensions, I believe, is DI. So if I type DI, I'm popped into the dimension command. Okay, in fact, yep, it is. It's DI, align dimension. Linear, it looks like linear, angular, and these others don't have a shortcut, but align dimension, if you just type DI, you will get that dimension. Okay, so let's talk about dimensions. Dimensions are really, really easy to use in Revit. If I want to create a dimension, I'm going to come up here, click on it, click. Okay, I have a dimension type. So really the dimension type here is kind of tied to, I guess we do have text height, but it's really more so connected to aesthetics, right? So if I click on this dimension type and I hit edit, you'll see that we have a lot of different aesthetic things to worry about with dimensions. Right? Is it, oh, the tick mark. Look at the tick mark, the line weight, dimension line extension, witness line control, right? So these are all going to be kind of aesthetic things that have to do with dimensions. All right, I'll talk about the definition of a few of these things when I actually pull a dimension. We have the width factor of the text. Do you want the text underlined? Do you want it bold? Do you want it to be 3/32 of an inch tall, or do you want it to be ½ inch tall? Whatever, right? So how the actual dimension looks, how thick the lines are on the dimension, how tall the text is on the dimension, the actual font that is used on the dimension, right? And then units here. You're going to see that the units for our dimensions, if I click on it, you know, for us, we want to use imperial units, right? So feet and inches. We can change the units for our dimensions, like if you wanted to do metric for whatever reason, right? If you want to confuse somebody in a presentation, use metrics here. Usually the project controls the units. So if the actual project units are set to imperial, then your dimensions will follow suit unless you uncheck, use project settings, and change how you want things to look. Okay, but how tall the text is, what the lines look like, the units, all that good stuff. I would say that Revit really set their dimensions up nicely. I think they aesthetically look great. Okay, so I think it's a good statement. I think a good statement would be, I don't change the way that the actual dimensions look generally in Revit. The only thing that I'll change with regard to dimensions is the size of the text. So if I have a specific instance where I need taller text or larger text, I'll change it, or if I want to change the font. But as far as how the dimension is actually constructed, I don't usually change that for a Revit dimension, right? I think it looks good enough. I'm going to hit OK here. Okay, so I have a dimension type, and you'll notice here that my dimension types, well, we have a couple of different, never mind, we won't go through that just yet. All right, so I have my dimension. I click on dimension to initiate the command. I'm going to create an aligned dimension. One thing you're going to want to notice before you start dimensioning is, where do you want Revit to pick from on the objects you're dimensioning? Do I want it to pick from wall center line, the face of the wall, the center of the core, meaning if you have a wood stud wall, it will pick the center of the wood stud, right? Or the face of the core. So if you have a wood stud, it will pick one side or the other of the wood stud. I'm just going to choose wall faces for now. Click. I hover over the object I want to start dimensioning at, right? So it's going to pick the wall face first, right? And if I happen to think, oh, I don't want the wall face, as I'm hovering and I'm not clicking, I tab. I can change where I locate my dimension line. Tab, 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 right? So I click, I move in the direction I want to go, right? As I hover over different objects, I'm going to get kind of points on that object I can choose, right? So I can choose the edge of the wall here, I can use the center line of the window, right? I can choose here, I can choose here, but it highlights in blue essentially as I move towards objects. To pick another object, like if I wanted center line, click. Now this dimension is a continuous command, it chains, right? So I can just keep going. Click, I'm gonna just be really dimension-y, right? Click, click. I drag my dimensions up where I wanna view them. And you notice I still am able to kind of continue on. The way that I'm gonna end this dimension is I'm just gonna click in space, click, and it creates those dimensions, okay? Now a few things that you wanna notice on your dimensions. Number one, they are blue right now. I haven't hit escape, I haven't clicked. I have some blue dimensions here, some numbers, right? If I click on that, okay, I get a dimension text dialog box where I can add text to this dimension, right? So for example, I can use the actual value, or I can replace it with text. Instead, you could say here, you know, field verify door location and hit OK. So instead of having a dimension, I can type in text, okay? You're also going to notice we have a little lock right here, okay? What this little lock does is that, you know, with this dimension associated to these objects, if I click on lock, that means that if I move this object, or I try to, I've placed a constraint on it. So if I try and move it or do something to it that breaks this dimension, I'll get an error and it will say your constraints are not satisfied, something to that effect, okay? So I can constrain these if I don't want anything to move. But by and far, and I wish they did this in AutoCAD, we have the equal sign here, right? So if I click on equal, it makes all of these dimensions equal for that wall, okay? I can slash it. It doesn't bring things back, but I can then change how I want things to look. When I click on equal, it's automatically a constraint. So you've automatically told Revit, hey, I want these things to be equal, okay? So if I delete these dimensions, hit delete, Revit will say, hey, wait a minute, you have an equal constraint there that, you know, needs to be satisfied. Do you want it to be maintained even though the dimensions aren't there? And you can say yes or no. I'm going to hit undo here real quick. Okay. Now you remember, I'm going to click on these dimensions again. I placed a constraint on this dimension, so now if I click on my door and I try and move it, MV, see, it won't move it. Usually you get an error actually. Maybe let's try and do this. Let's try and do this maybe. Oh, nope. I was trying to make the error. Usually you'll get an error that says something about you have a constraint. Would you like to break that constraint or blah, 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 whatever. This is not giving me one. It's just not moving it, which is its job, right? But I do usually actually like to get an error. Anyway, so we've constrained this door, good and bad, right? When I first started using Revit, I constrained everything because I thought I don't want any of this stuff to move, right? But then I realized that things do continue to move in an architectural project all the time, right? We update them, we move things even by a ½ inch to make them line up. And so when you have a ton of constraints, I found that more than anything, I just got a million errors by constraining everything, right? So every now and again I do constrain something, but if I do constrain it, it's, you know, it's do or die. It's a very important constraint. I just don't kind of lock things down in general because it causes more problems than it's worth, honestly. And it causes problems because if I go in and I move this door, right, and it has a constraint on it, MV, oh, come on, let's see if I can, now I can't get the error to work. Let me move this wall. If I decide I want to move that wall without telling me, Revit just moves the door in this wall. And you think, oh good, I was able to move that wall. But little do you know that the piece is off screen, right? I move it out this way a little bit more. I think, oh good, that worked out just great. It's the perfect dimension. And then, you know, right before you're supposed to print for your client coming in, you realize that in moving that wall, it moved the door as well. And you're thinking, well, I didn't want to move the door, I just wanted to move the wall over, right? So again, I like the idea of a constraint. I don't put too many in here though, because it ends up kind of causing more trouble than I want. So, but we can constrain things if we need to, okay? If I click on my door with my dimensions here, I can also move it, right? So if I click on my dimension, I can change text, I can do different things to the text associated with it. If I click on an object, the dimensions that are associated with that object highlight. So I could come in here and type 6'6", and it moves that door 6'6" off the inside of that wall, right? So dimensions in Revit are not only used for construction documents, CDs, for your final, you know, built project. They're also used very much in helping you construct your drawings. So, you know, and again, I mean, this is a class we start beginning to end, and we learn things in a progression, right? So you'd think, well, it'd be nice to learn dimensions, but if you didn't know how to create geometry, the dimensions wouldn't do any good. So now you know how to create geometry. I'm adding dimensions to help you manipulate that geometry. But dimensions are used really heavily in Revit to create things, okay? If you're used to AutoCAD, in AutoCAD, you more so create extra geometry to then generate the correct geometry, right? You're offsetting things, you're mirroring things about lines you generate. In Revit, you get used to creating a lot of dimensions that you then delete when you're done with them, right? So for example, I'm going to delete this string of dimensions. If I wanted this door centered about this wall, it's kind of hard. I mean, I could measure on each side. I could draw a line and then center it, but it's a simple task, but it's a little bit hard to think about doing in Revit, right? So the way that I'm going to center this door on this wall, after I've already placed it, I'm going to create a dimension, click, 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 click in nowhere land. I get that equal constraint and I center that door, right? That's kind of the best way of going about it. So dimensions help you generate geometry in Revit. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna unconstrain it. There we go. All right, so let's look at dimensions again. I'm gonna go back to aligned. Click, 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 click. Pull it up where I want it to go, right? I don't want my dimensions crossing things in a bad place like that section. Bad, right? You want somebody to know you're a rookie in Revit? Do things like that, right? Pull your dimensions out past other annotation objects. Make sure they're, you know, nice. They're aligned, obviously. Click in nowhere land and you get your string of dimensions. Okay. One really nice thing about Revit and dimensions, okay, this is something that I wish they would do in AutoCAD as well. You see how I have this dimension right here that is 1 foot 1 7/8 inches, which is weird. We'll talk about that in a second. If I click on it, you know, we have this little grip, and this little grip will allow me to drag my text from my dimension somewhere. If I click on it and hold, and I move, look at that magic that happens, right? Wouldn't that be nice in AutoCAD? I let go and I have a little dimension, a leader, a nice looking leader that connects the text and moves it out of place so it looks better. Okay, our dimensions are made up of a couple of different things, right? We have our actual text. Okay, if I click on it, I can grab my little grip and I can move it. We have our baseline here. We have our dimension line, which is this horizontal line, and it extends a certain distance away from the edge here. I have my our architectural tick right here. You know, that kind of shows me where a dimension starts and stops. And I have my extension line. So this object right here that comes down and touches the architecture, right? That's an extension line. We have a little gap between the extension line and the object that it is dimensioning, right? So if I click on this, you know, I get a little grip and I can pull it back and I can bring it forward if I want. Okay, but essentially I have a little predefined gap right there. So we have our extension line, we have our dimension line, we have our architectural tick, and we have our text. We also have, this is called a leader line, all right? If I click on a dimension and I hit edit type, you're going to notice all of these different features defined in here, right? So let's see, well, I guess they call these witness lines actually, right? These extension lines in Revit, they call them witness lines, something new, I guess. But the witness lines, is there a gap to the element, right? We just looked at that. You could say, you know, fix to a dimension line and hit OK. And they pop up. So they're fixed up further than they were before, right? I don't like how that looks. It makes it kind of hard to read the dimension. Edit. And witness line. We'll change that back, right? But we have witness line gap to the element, a 1/16 of an inch. Witness line tick mark, 3/30 seconds, right? So all of these things that we see here, this architectural tick, the extension or witness line, the dimension line overhead here, the text, all controlled by the dimension style, okay? I feel like there's a ton of explanation for these dimensions, but they're just so simple to use, funny enough. So we have our align dimension, which will allow you to align your dimensions to objects, okay? We have linear dimensions, where if I click, let me save this, and I want to dimension something that is slightly askew. Let's maybe make this slightly askew. There we go. We've got a weird little wall there, right? But if I wanted to dimension this with a linear dimension, okay, oop. Why isn't it letting me dimension? What do we have going on here? Let's try with an align dimension. Oh, interesting. I get a straight dimension regardless of what I'm doing. It's kind of weird. My, let's see. There we go. Okay. No? Huh. It doesn't like these objects for whatever reason. It's kind of weird. That's really odd. Let's go to a main level floor plan. Maybe it's because they're demoed. Maybe this weirdness is causing some problems. Ah. Ooh, that's odd. All right, we might have to come back to our linear dimensions because it's not wanting to, it's picking a couple things, but it won't allow me to pick everything, which is kind of interesting. We must have some setting inherent in this linear dimension. Maybe it's a phase filter that's not allowing us. Okay, let's try this. There's some really, is anybody else having trouble with this? Can try it out and see if it works for you guys. I'm clicking and it's just not working.
That happened to me with my stairs.
With your stairs?
Yeah.
With the linear dimension?
With the align, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
That's weird.
No, mine's not.
Yours isn't working either?
Not on everything.
That's weird. Okay. It's
Are you
all
looking to modify place where that isn't finished?
Yeah.
with that.
My linear
You're not looking to modify.
Like a sketch, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not in a sketch at all. That's okay. We might have to come back to that one. That one's weird. I don't know why it's not working, honestly. Generally, linear. I mean, they all. I said that right. They all work really well. You know, like angular. Click, click. I can get an angle. Click, click, and I can get an angle. Right. So I'm not sure why. I might have to look at it a little bit more.
Why do you need to use linear?
You don't really.
You use align.
Like I said, I usually prefer aligned because I feel like I get kind of, I have more control over it because it will follow any angle in my project, right? But there is always the option to use a linear dimension. Maybe you for sure just want to get straight lines, you know, straight line dimensions. So linear would be a good option because it kind of constrains you into getting those straight line options. But that is indeed if we can get them to work, right? Ooh, I'm getting it. Ooh, I'm getting a visual error even though here, so that's kind of odd. Let me start a new, here's my solve all, right? Let's start a new file and see what happens. Oh, and my thing is not. Okay, we're gonna come back to linear dimensions. I think I need to reboot my Revit. I'm gonna reboot my Revit, map my drives, and then we'll try again. Maybe. Well, let's just do it now. I'm gonna save this. Let's see, I need to map my drives. Let's try again. I forget this is a pretty fast computer. My home computer, it would take 8 minutes to do this, right? Honestly. Go get a cup of coffee, come back, still not ready. And in the meantime, the power goes out, right? The struggle is real. All right, let's see. Annotate. Linear, we'll try again. Nope, we're still having the same issue. This might be something I'm gonna have to research. Let's do a new file. Okay, annotate. Linear. Nope, so it's not specific to my file. I don't know what's going on. Because I'm getting select a reference and click an empty space to place dimension. Press space bar to toggle between horizontal and vertical, right? So I'm not getting anything, so I don't know what the problem is. I'll have to look into it. Ooh, a stumper. All right, well, we'll move on. So I'll look at that today and see what I can find out about linear dimensions, because usually they're very easy to use. We have our angular dimension, which will measure an angle, right? So very easy. I click on angular, click, click, and I get an angle, click, right? I click in nowhere land to place a dimension. If I have something like, I'm gonna create a circular, we'll create a circular wall here. Oh, look at that. It's a beautiful thing. If I have a radial dimension I need, click. I click on the outer edge of the circle, click, and immediately I get a dimension, click again, and I place it, right? So click, click. Again, these are very easy to use. Diameter, you know, I can choose the inside, click, click, and I get a diameter, right? Makes it pretty simple to use. Again, by and far, I use the align dimension the most. DI, click, click, and I have my dimension, okay? I'm going to talk a little bit more about my dimension strings here, just for a second. Click, I can tab to select certain objects. I can select objects that are on different phases, right? I cannot click in space. You know, in AutoCAD, when you dimension something, you can just click in space and it works, right? But in Revit, we actually have to have something that it touches in order for it to work, okay? I can move the text, right? If I double click on my text, click, click, oop, faster than that, click, click, oop, come on, click, click, there we go. I get my dimension text box. Now I can get that when I initially create the dimensions as well, but I have a lot of different ways that I can edit the text. Unfortunately, as an AutoCAD, we can't completely just override a dimension, right? If I wanted to do something like, you know, type in 19 foot 6 and 3/4 of an inch, right? I don't want this to read, and I hit OK. It won't let me override the value of it, right? So you have to kind of find ways around doing this, which we all do. You know, you could do something like or equal. Add a piece of text, apply it, and I get my text in dimension, okay? I can add text above. I'm gonna use my actual value. I can add text above here. Above, apply, and I get text above. I can do text below. Apply, right? So if you want to do something like 11 equal stairs at 10 inches a piece or whatever, right? You can add descriptive text into your dimension. If I want to prefix. If I get a suffix, right? I can do that same thing. So there are a lot of ways, and I just double click on this very fast, click, click, and I can add text as necessary, okay? Other than adding another completely different dimension, right? I can add a lot of things into my dimension text, okay? If I click on my dimension string, it is all one piece. If I need to delete it, I have to delete the whole piece. What determines if it's a whole piece or not is how many strings of dimensions you create when you create your initial string of dimensions. So if I come in here and I go to aligned and I click, go up, click in nowhere land, and I start again, click, align. Do you see how when I move up it snaps and aligns? Click, right? Those two are separate dimensions, so I can delete one and not the other, okay? I don't like this change I've made to my dimension style there. That's why I don't change it, right? Okay, there we go. I can click on a dimension, click and hold my mouse and drag them about, right? So very editable. I can stack dimensions. So if I click on align dimension again, I can click, and I can stack one above, click, right? And as you're doing this, you're going to get a feel for what's happening, but you can get a good see how it snaps, and it feels like it snaps with your mouse. So those are all equally spaced from one another, right? So I can move it out if I want, but as I get close, I get a good snap, and all of those baseline snaps can be exactly the same, okay? I can edit where my object is being dimensioned to. So if I misplace this dimension and I want it to be to the edge of the window, I can click on this middle grip on my witness line and drag it over, let go, click, I'm holding my mouse button, click, let go. I can drag this thing up and down, okay? So dimensions they're easy to use, right? They're very editable. You can add text to them, which makes it very easy. And let me just show you the best part ever about dimensions. Okay, how many of you use AutoCAD? I've asked this a lot. Not a lot of you use AutoCAD, right? Well, I know you do, Corey, right? But here's the best part. If I change the scale of my drawing, when I'm in AutoCAD, that's a pain in the neck because I have to redo all of my dimensions, right? But if I change the scale of my my drawing here, it changes, automatically updates the text so it's the right size, and I really just kind of need to move them a little bit to make them readable, right? That was kind of an extreme scale change. You guys get the idea, but the nice thing is that it does compensate for that, right? So when well, maybe you all don't know, but this text has to be a certain height in order for it to scale down to then print a correct size, okay? I'm not going to get into that explanation, but you know, this is kind of the best part about Revit, where I change scale and it updates all of my annotation, it updates all of my section markers and interior elevation markers and all of my everything, right? Everything updates to the scale that is currently shown here, which even though it's not a perfect system, it's much better than it was, right? I really only need to have one dimension style and everything works, okay? And in AutoCAD, before annotative scaling, annotative dimensions, we had multiple dimension styles that we used, okay? All right, so dimensions are pretty easy, right? For your midterm project, you're going to have dimensions on your midterm project. I think on, well, that's another topic, hold on. We'll talk about that in a second. Any questions on dimensions so far? Okay, I have just a couple other things I want to talk about with dimensions. One thing is, how do I change the rounding on them, right? So if I have some dimensions, DI or align dimension, that one's a pretty good number, right? But if I change it to like right there, 9/16, and you're like, well, that's not a great number, right? But it is 9/16, but I don't like it. So I can either move the wall and make it an even increment, or if I click on the dimension and I hit edit type, I do have a way I can round these, okay? So under unit format, click, I can choose use project settings, which we're not going to get into just yet, but you'll notice if I uncheck that, this will round to the nearest 1/32 of an inch. That's way too fine for me. So I'm going to change this to the nearest 1/4 inch. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. Okay, and now even though it's slightly off dimension by what, a 1/32 of an inch, this will round to the nearest 1/4 of an inch. Okay, if I want to change the text, I can hit edit type, and I could change the text, you know, so from Arial to Bank Gothic. We won't do that. Arial or Bank Gothic, okay, right? It will change the text. Now, the thing about this is that I'm changing a dimension type, right? Or a style. And so when I change that style, anywhere where that dimension lives, it universally changes, right? So any dimension that was created, well, these are different dimension styles, but any dimension that was created now has that text associated with it, right? You see that? Hey, Brian. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, perfect. All right, so we have our dimension style. We know how to create dimensions. You know, I think you're gonna have to kind of play with them to get them, to get a feeling for them, right? The main things I want you to just recognize that you can tab, right? So I come in here to aligned. If I'm not hitting the point that I want to dimension to, I tab, right? So tab, 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 okay? I can pull them out, I can line them up, I can change the text, I can change a lot of things about them, okay? All right, any questions about dimensions so far? No? Okay. Let's talk about text and leaders. These text and leaders are another magical thing about Revit, honestly. And I say that coming from AutoCAD, right? Having used AutoCAD for so long. Dimensions, they're actually in AutoCAD work pretty well. Leaders work pretty well in AutoCAD now. But in Revit, they're just so easy to use that it's hard to compare. So we have our annotate tab and we have all of our dimensions over here, right? And then if you go down a little bit further, we have a text tool palette right here, all right? Where I have my text option, okay? If I click on text, I can generate text, but I can also generate leaders, okay? So dimensions give, obviously, dimensions of things, and text gives, you know, you can add titles or descriptive notes about things. And leaders point to different objects on the drawing to describe them, okay? So if I want to generate just text, I'm going to make sure that my no leader text option is selected, right? So if I click in Space Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, enter, enter. Oh, nope, sorry, now we have to close. Sorry, that's a new thing. Close, and I have my text, right? So if I use this option and I click, I'm just doing text. You're going to notice that if I click on my text, I have the option to rotate it. And I also have the option to move it. And I also have the option to change my text box. Okay, looks good. I have the option to justify it. And I have, this is not really concerning us just yet, but if I had a leader on this text, I would have the option to show where the leader was going to be located. So at the top, at the middle, or at the bottom, and both on left and right sides. Okay. Text. I also have leader options within my text option. So I have a straight leader with 2 segments. I have a curved section, and I have just a 1 segment straight leader. So click on one section of leader. I click, close. Okay, so that will only allow straight leaders. Here I have 2 segments. Click. This will allow me to create diagonal. Click, click, click. 1, 2. Enter. Oh, sorry, I'm used to entering. You have to hit close now. I actually think you can click out of it off to the side, but then you create a new leader. All right, so I have my leader here. If I click on it.
Are those arrows annotators then too? Did you change the scale?
Yep, yep. So if I change the scale, everything compensates. Yep. Well, that's the most emotion we've gotten out of you over Revit. This is funny because it's like, you know, when they were trying to sell Revit a decade ago, whatever, you'd bring this into an office and everybody would be like, wow, look what it can do, you know, look how it changes scale, look how, just amazing. Anyway, so this is kind of a big deal. All right, so I can move it, right, again, I can rotate it, even if it's a leader, okay. Over here, if I click on this leader with 2 points, I can click on the end and hold my mouse, and I can drag it to wherever I want it to go, right? Should we do, there we go. You're going to be doing them all over the place now, right? Click. Oh my gosh, look at that.
Not a center end thing.
I mean, I guess kind of informally click, and you get it. But you don't have to define like a dimension for it, no. With arc, my nemesis, arc from AutoCAD. But it is really nice. It's very, what I like about these leaders is that they have a lot of integrity, right? The ones, AutoCAD is getting better, but what I don't like about it a lot of times is that, you know, if I were to do this, then probably the leader lines would, you know, not follow, and it would look askew and be funny. And what I really like about Revit is that their leaders are just so useful, right? And they're so, you can change them and it works, right? I can grab this and I could pull this all the way over here and it works. And I could drag this and I could pull this over here and it works, right? And I could grab this and I could pull this over here and line it up with that one below it and it works, right? There's another good option, right? That as I hover towards the text below with the leader, I get a snap and they line up. Right? Really nice. Okay. So we have text, we have leaders. If I click on my leader, let me do a couple of strings of text. Close. Okay. And I click on it, you'll notice that I have these little add leader buttons here. And AutoCAD did add these several years ago, but if I want to create a new leader, I would click, place a new one, click, place a new one, click, 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 and I can place as many leaders as I'd like, right? On both sides, right? And I could get rid of a leader, and it gets rid of them from the newest one created, but I can get rid of leaders as well, right? I can change my justification. This is all pretty, I'm moving pretty quickly, but it's all pretty, I think, intuitive as far as how text functions within these, right? You all know how to use Microsoft Word. A lot of you have used AutoCAD, right? We understand that, or if you didn't, you will now, that the text in these leaders and text in general, it functions exactly the same as any word processor, right? So if I double click and I want to edit it, I have to select it, hit delete, and we could type 4, 5, 6, okay? I can bold the text, I can italicize it, underline it, I can add bullets, I can do 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers, right? I can indent, I can do an indent here, I can bring it forward, right? A forward indent, and then when I'm done, I hit close. But fairly easy, right? Double click, select, I can change the text, it all functions very well. Okay. Now, with dimensions, I didn't really change a whole lot about the dimension style, right? I think the line weights look good. I think the text is generally okay. But for actual leaders and dimensions, a lot of times I will make changes to them. I will change the text style, right? The font. I will change the height of the font. And so let me show you how to edit these, right? And change those. If I click on a piece of text, you're going to notice under properties, right, I have a text type. This is a 1/4" Arial. If I drop down, we only have a couple, but 3/32 Arial, right? So that changes it. These, again, function just like anything else in Revit, where if I have a wall type and I want to change it, you know, I select the object, I use the drop down, pick the one I want, and it changes it to the new type, okay? If I want to create a new type, so if I want to create a new text type, I would select the text that is closest to the one I want to create. I would hit Edit Type, click, and I think, again, kind of the biggest thing, you have the text font you're going to probably want to change, and then the text size. So if I want to change this from Arial to you know, whatever that is. I don't know how readable that is. And then we want it from 1/4 of an inch to 1 inch, and I hit OK, right? Now I have, that doesn't even look like it really changed. Edit type. Let's pick one that we, oh, terrible. Terrible. Okay. Anyway, so we're able to change it, right? So I can go in, I can edit it, I can change the text. Now, by changing this text type, any instance of that text that already exists, as you can see, changed, right? The height changed, the font changed. If I want to create a new text style, I would hit edit type, duplicate, give it a new name, 1/8 inch, Swiss light. I would hit OK. And then I could change these. So the good old Swiss LTBT, right? Swiss BT, there we go. We'll make it 1/8 inch. And the width factor will be maybe like 0.75 and hit OK. Right, so there is my Swiss LT, right, 1/8 inch text. So again, just like anything else in Revit where if I want to create a new type, I select the one most closely related to the one I want. I hit edit, I duplicate, I rename, and I redefine, okay? And I'm not going into all of the text options too much because, to be honest, they just make a lot of sense, right? It's all stuff that you can look at, edit type. You can look at these and say text font, well, I know what that is. The text size, well, I want it 1/8 inch, right? Do I want it, what's the width factor? Do I want it bold or italicized? You know, so the options within our text styles are actually fairly simple to work with, okay? All right. Any questions on dimensions or text so far? You might have a few before you turn your projects in, maybe. Yep.
So in general, do you set up different text styles for the different things you're working on?
You might have a few. You might have like 2 or 3 different text styles. And the reason you will is because you'll have, you know, kind of the text style for your dimension, right? You'll have a text style for your notes on your page, like your general notes. And then you'll have one for your leaders, which should be similar to your dimensions, right? So 2 or 3 different types of text. And usually the reason you're going to change it is because maybe your office doesn't like Arial. They use, you know, City Blueprint or whatever. So you're going to set a couple up according to your office standard, essentially. Okay, one other thing I want to get to today, which is like, maybe I say this too much, the best thing about Revit. Just kidding. I'm going to delete some of these things here. I want you to add rooms to your Revit projects, okay? I'm going to pull that out. We'll get rid of the turret. Oh, it's not, okay, let's see, where is it? I was going to take a peek at it. Previous plus new. Oh, I don't know. Pretty nice, right? Oh my goodness. There's a house, has anybody seen that house in like Colville? It's out in the middle of nowhere and it looks like a giant castle. It's got all these turrets and like a giant drive-through through the middle of the house where you can drive your truck underneath it and go into the backyard, and it looks like a castle.
Like a gate?
Yeah, kind of like a gate. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, it's it's what is that place called? It's I don't know, there's like a fish hatchery or something on your way to Colville. Anyway. This reminded me of it. We'll keep it as part of it for fun, right? All right. So room names, right? Not necessarily in the same category as adding just kind of plain old text or plain old leaders or plain old dimensions. But something that you're going to have to do for your project, okay, is add room names. And room names, let me go back to my architecture tab here. Room names are very easy to create, but they are a smart object in Revit, meaning when you add a room name to a space, right, you are actually defining a room in Revit, right? And Revit keeps track of rooms. And it keeps track of rooms as far as how much area is in a room, how much volume is in a room, what kind of floor finish is going to be in a room. So you can, I guess, essentially extract information about different spaces out and use it in schedules according to its defined room. Okay. Sounds a lot more complicated than it is. So let me show you how to define a room, and then we'll talk about what it does, right? If I go to my architecture tab here, and I go all the way down here, I have a room option. Okay. So let's look at this little graphic. I actually think these graphics are pretty great. But essentially, you know, a room tag like in AutoCAD, when you place a room tag, it's just a piece of text, right? And you may have some attributes associated with it, making it kind of fancy, right? But it's essentially just a dumb piece of text. It doesn't have any information associated with it. You're going to have to get used to the idea that in Revit, everything has information attached to it, right? And so when I add a room, Revit recognizes the name, the square footage, the volume, you know, a lot of different attributes about that room, okay? I'm going to click on room, and I'm going to hover down here over my project, okay? And you're going to see that as I hover, Revit is sending out a little boundary here, right? And it is sensing room boundaries. And it's sensing room boundaries according to architectural elements that define rooms. So walls that go from, you know, floor to ceiling, or doors define rooms, or sometimes windows can define rooms, okay? But essentially it's looking for a division in this project that can be defined as a room. Okay, now I'm going to click, and I placed a room. So now it's defining that room, room number 1, and it is the interior boundary of these defining walls. I'm going to hit escape. If I click on this wall, I don't know if you ever noticed, but in its properties, you see how it says room bounding, right? If I uncheck that, do you see how that room now extends out into the whole project, right? And if I click on that wall and I choose room bounding, now that room is just there, okay? So make sure that your rooms are bounded before you go and place them. But essentially it's as easy as clicking on room, going into the room, clicking, and that's about it for my project. If I click out here, click, it says, hey, you can't do that because there's no boundary, right? But essentially what I've done here now, if I go into a sectional view, okay, I'm going to hover over my main level, see if I can grab my room. There it is. Do you see how now I have this three-dimensional room? Not only did it define the boundaries in 2D, like in the floor plan, right? But now it bounded from level 1 to level 2, right? And that, you know, you won't necessarily use that in an architectural model, but that would be pretty helpful for you know, mechanical engineer who's trying to figure out how much air they need to feed into this room with this much volume in it, right? So the rooms are pretty helpful for calculations. I guess you could say area takeoffs almost, because if you have a volume, then maybe you could connect that to the walls, right? For area takeoffs, maybe a reach. But essentially, it's going to add another level of information into the model that can be used by somebody, right? So these rooms are volumetric, so I can see them in 2D and 3D. I can tag them in 2D and 3D. If I click on this room and I click again, I can redefine the name. I can give it a new number. I can click over here. I can't give it the same number as that one. Wait a minute, you can't do that, right? Freaks out. So we'll call this bedroom 2, right? I can call this new space, right? And we can call this fire hazard. Let's call that. Right, there we go. Oh, nobody else thinks it's funny. Anyway, all right. So we have our rooms, and they're defined as rooms, right? Okay. Sorry, let me just, so we have our rooms, they're defined, great. We can add as many rooms as we want, right? So if I add some more walls and I create some more bounded area, right? This is a bad example, but I've just created a new bounded area here, right? And so now that, you know, room tag kind of recognizes that I've kind of cordoned off this space, right? I can come up, click on room, oop, and it adds another room. Okay. If I don't want to add another wall, but I want to portion off a piece of the space, like maybe we've got the new space here, but we have the kitchen over here, and I want to create a new tag that shows a kitchen there, but I don't want to show a physical boundary, right? I have the option to add a room separator. Click. This will allow me to just draw a line across an area. It doesn't have to be super accurate, but it does have to go from one object that is a room boundary to another object that bounds a room, okay? And that is essentially creating a barrier. So now my new space, right, only goes in here. And I click on room, and I can separate those rooms out, okay? So for your midterm, you're gonna wanna put your rooms in, right? Make sure that all of your walls, if something is not working with your rooms, make sure they are room bounding, okay? Yeah, okay. Those are pretty easy. I'm just gonna stop there with the room tags. They get a little bit more complicated in that if I wanted to delete a room tag, I could click on it and I could hit delete, but I'm just deleting the tag, right? And I don't want you to worry too much about this other than just know that this is happening. I can delete a tag. Do you see how my room still remains? My room is still there, but I can get rid of the tag. If I want to bring the tag back, I have tag room. Okay, click. It's not defining a new room, it's just tagging an existing room, okay? Rooms are a little finicky in that once you create them, they're there, and they're really difficult to get rid of. Even if I come in here and I tab, and I click on the actual room, right, and I hit delete, a room was deleted from the model, but it still remains in the project. You're like, wait a minute, I just tried to delete it, right? So these do still remain. So kind of one of the last things that I do is create my room so that I know that I don't have any extras, so I don't have these extra ones hanging out, okay? Anyway, so you'll add room tags into your projects as well, right? And I don't mind, you can name them whatever you want, right? It's a good idea to make them sequential, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, but just get used to the idea of adding rooms in here, okay? That was a lot. I feel like that was a lot today. Any questions so far? Yep.
Say you don't want to see them on a plan, can you hide them as an element altogether? Do you have to select them individually?
So you can, like if I click on one, I can right click and choose select all instances visible in view, and then it selects them all, and I can right click and choose hide in view by element, and it gets rid of them. So it's just the tag itself. So yeah, you can hide them per view. Yep. And if I go into a view and they're not showing, like I hid them here, but if I go into something like demo floor plan and they're not showing, I can go to tag a room and see how they all kind of show up, right? I can tag them in here as well. Okay. That's a lot. People are sighing. All right. So this is kind of all I wanted to do for today, and I feel like it was kind of a lot. I think in order for you to have questions, honestly, you'll kind of just have to work through them, or work with the objects, like create dimensions or create text or whatever, or create rooms. So on Wednesday, what I'd like to do is I'd like to work in class. So if you have any questions about your midterm, you can come in and ask questions and work, and I can answer questions. And then Monday, your midterm will be due.
At the end of class?
Yeah, we can do it at the end of class. That's fine. If you have any other questions or you want to come in and print, let's do that. I think that's a good idea. Yeah, and then on Wednesday, we're going to talk about storefront systems. So move into the commercial realm, and you're going to have another commercial project that you'll work on till the end of the semester, essentially. Sound good? Okay.